is bouncing back from the effects of coronavirus, and the world is watching to see what they can expect from life after lockdown. China's economy is now functioning at around 90% of normal levels. A 90% economy may not sound too bad, but for many it could be catastrophic.
Some of the worst unemployment numbers in this country's history. 6.6 million plus people laid off in a single week.
As global lockdowns ease, the economy faces the greatest challenge in living memory. Here's what you need to know. In China, factories are up and running. Classrooms are full, restaurants are open, but the economy has not returned to normal. In fact, it's operating at around 90% of usual levels. And as lockdowns ease elsewhere, this 90% economy could be what the rest of the world has to look forward to. Regardless of how countries have dealt with the pandemic, it's becoming clear that once businesses have to operate with social distancing in place, the economy can be expected to shrink by about 10%, whether that's in South Korea, America, or Sweden. But the missing 10% will mean life will feel far from normal. In China, large chunks of everyday life are missing. Having collapsed in January, consumer footfall has recovered to about half its previous levels. Hotel occupancy is still down by around 50%, and 75% fewer people are flying. This dip in so-called fun spending will continue even after lockdowns are relaxed. In Sweden, most people were never asked to stay at home during the pandemic, but Swedish spending patterns over the past few months have mirrored those in neighbouring Denmark, which has been under lockdown. Daily restaurant turnover fell by 70% last month, as uncertainty over the economy and fear of infection meant fewer Swedes ate out. And while overall Danish spending fell by 29% during lockdown, Swedes cut their spending by almost as much. The true economic impact of imposing lockdowns will take time to emerge. In China, it was several months after the lockdown began to be lifted before bankruptcy numbers started to rise. For the past few months, the global economy has been propped up by unprecedented levels of state aid. In Europe's 5 largest economies, 1 in 5 workers is currently in a special scheme where the state pays their wages.
The government has deployed 750 billion euros to sustain companies. That's unprecedented.
The government is going to step in and help to pay people's wages.
It's only as this support is gradually withdrawn that the wider cost of Covid-19 will become clear. It will impact all levels of the economy. Let's take a look at one scenario. A small business owner runs a chain of restaurants. When the pandemic hits, he takes out a loan and furloughs his staff. He's not alone. In March, more cash was handed out to UK businesses than in any month since records began. After lockdown, he reopens, but business is slow, so he makes staff redundant and closes a restaurant as he can't pay the rent. This has already been happening. In the first quarter of the year, the share of commercial tenants who paid their rent on time in Britain fell from 90% to 60%, with big firms like Burger King admitting they couldn't make rent on empty restaurants. Without these rent payments, his landlord can no longer keep up with her mortgage. And ultimately, her bank is left with debt that cannot be repaid. Key economic factors already indicate that the world is facing a prolonged recession. Already, unemployment in America is at its highest rate since the Great Depression. But these losses will not be felt equally. To see how, let's go back to our restaurant owner. The industries hit hardest by the COVID-19 pandemic are labour-intensive and rely on an army of low-paid workers. And it is these people who are particularly likely to lose their jobs. In America, you are already twice as likely to be made redundant if you're earning less than $20,000 a year than $80,000 a year.
The kind of jobs that won't exist at all or in much reduced numbers will be the kind of jobs that are typically done by people who are paid less, jobs that are done by women, and jobs that are done by ethnic minorities more commonly. So that's jobs in things like leisure hospitality, retail trade, and that kind of thing.
And these economic changes will shape the political agenda in the post-lockdown world.
You could imagine a situation where it becomes kind of commonsensical that the essential workers who've kept the economy going, you can imagine a push towards trying to improve their standard of living and standard of work.
It's too soon to know which way the political tide will turn, and each country's response will be different. But one certainty is that the longer we all have to wait for a vaccine to be developed and distributed, or effective treatment found, the more pronounced the effects of the 90% economy will be.